Welcome back, Wolfpack. Verlis here, and this is how to use Incineroar, a fire dark anthropomorphic wrestling tiger. I just said all of those things in the same sentence, and we are still talking about Pokemon. So that's pretty crazy right there, and I do want to look at the breakdown defensively of how this typing is going to work. Bit more weaknesses than I would like to see, but we do get an interesting amount of synergy. That fire will protect us from bug and fairy super effective hits, so it's really just a fighting weakness on the dark, and then a good amount of supers that we're used to with fire type Pokemon. Rock isn't the worst. Fighting is either going to be not too bad, or we're going to see a close combat, which becomes very bad. Water is a problem, and ground is a problem, so kind of like 2.5-ish weaknesses when we break it down. Immune to Psychic isn't really too much of a surprise when it comes to dark, and then a good amount of resistances depending on how ghostly we're going to see the meta. Some ghost type Pokemon do come in, this will be very beneficial. Steel, fire, grass, ice, and dark resistances, pretty much Incineroar balance. I think that in the end becomes pretty balanced. Offensively, we do pretty well. Fire just hits a lot of things, bug, grass, ice, and steel. Dark doesn't really add too much to us, but we do have a nice little spread when it comes to those hits on the fire dark typing. Now, Incineroar's stats are where things start getting insane, because this Pokemon is a tank. Like, you'd expect it to maybe be a little more agile, a little more fast. No, this Pokemon has 95 on its hit points, which is actually really good, and 90s in the defenses. A lot of Pokemon dream to be this tanky, and it's on a brawler kind of Pokemon, which is kind of interesting right there. 60 on the base speed makes sense, but 115 on the attack shows we have damage, and it might actually mean something. So Incineroar stats, I'd actually say it did pretty well in the end. We look at Decidueye, and then Decidueye was supposed to be a little tankier and slightly faster, but I think Incineroar comes out on top on the stats by comparison. Looking at Incineroar's signature move, it will be Darkest Lariat. Now this is actually awesome right here, because you think about Crunch. Crunch is your standard dark physical hit, 85 base power, but Darkest Lariat actually bringing us 5 more base power. You add stab, you add some other like changes and stat effects. That's going to be pretty nice. So more damage overall just for free, and there's no drawbacks. We actually get a nice little benefit as well. Ignores the opponent's stat changes. So if your opponent's trying to boost defense, gain something right there, you just say no to them, and then you go and wreck their day. So Darkest Lariat, actually a really solid move. Then we can go and take a quick look at Incineroar's moveset right here. We see Throat Chop. Throat Chop is actually really awesome. You can tech that move in if you want to as well. Other than that, we do get a little bit of utility out of our egg moves on that fake out and stuff, so we can definitely work that in somewhere. And then the rest is pretty much standard stuff, like what you would expect from a physical-ish Pokemon that's kind of running off TMs and whatnot. So overall, really nice. We do see the Leech Life in there. I don't know how well that's going to work, but it is something to maybe possibly consider. Looking at some movesets for how to use your Incineroar. Bulk Attacker, that seems like the trend when it comes to these starter Pokemon for the 7th generation. So max out hit points, max out attack, Adamant Nature, Life Orb, actually does pretty well. So we can look and see Darkest Lariat, that's going to be our main form of damage. The idea is we are tanky. We have hit point investment, we have 90s on our defenses. If we're not eating super effective hits, we might do alright. So the point is Darkest Lariat is just going to be a 2-shot on a lot of different Pokemon. Take a hit, deal a hit, take a hit, deal a hit, win. Flare Blitz is our ultimate nuke. That an ideal scenario for Incineroar is that it comes in on a weakened foe, picks it off with the Darkest Lariat, boom, takes a hit from the next Pokemon, and then finishes off with Flare Blitz, and then kind of 1 for 1.5. And if you do enough of those throughout the Pokemon battle, you just might eventually win. Earthquake for coverage, or whatever other coverage move you see fit. And I like Will-O-Wisp, because things are going to want to take advantage of you. Whenever you're just kind of playing around and you're going for setup and you see a slow Pokemon like Incineroar that doesn't necessarily one-shot everything, you're just thinking that's free. So free Swords Dance, free Dragon Dance, free something, and then you can abuse that Pokemon later. So the Will-O-Wisp, you can take out those physical threats and then keep adding onto your bulk. You also have Intimidate. So over time, your opponent's physical threat just won't mean anything if you do play the Incineroar. Unfortunately, doesn't have any kind of like sustainability, so Incineroar just kind of comes out there, tries to be a beast, and if it succeeds, yay. If not, it's just a starter Pokemon, so we weren't expecting much anyways. Another moveset idea on the Incineroar is what I'm calling Bulldoze. It gets access to the Bulldoze, so you might as well do damage weaken your opponent, set up a bulk up, and then try to snowball from there. So I was thinking, yeah, you can bulldoze, bulk up, that way you gain stats over them. If they are a physical attacker, they're just not going to do anything to you. After that intimidate, you tank them. After the bulk up, you tank them. And then you just Darkest Lariat for the win at +1 or +2. Citrus Berry for sustain, since we don't really have much. And the Jolly nature does bring us to an interesting little side note. Scarf or speed sets will be a 100 base speed Pokemon. So if you're using something like Flame Charge, gaining those stats right there, Flame Charge can be substituted for Bulldoze. But with Bulldoze, it at least gives you the option that if you can hit your opponent but not necessarily finish them off, that means the next Pokemon coming in for your side will be able to finish off the now slowed Pokemon, and it brings you up to 100 base speed outspeeds. So not everything, Greninja's still going to trash you pretty hard, but it at least gives you an option as a slower Pokemon. Also, Battle Berries, Psylocke Berry, Lychee Berry might do something that have Leech Life, because if you're somehow bulking up 1 or 2 times and you find that super effective hit on the Leech Life, that is going to be substantial right there. Or it just might be a little to add in. Leech Life now having 80 base power and the same 50% heal could do something. That's all I've got to say is it could do something. If not, you have all kinds of other coverage that we have mentioned before. And then, surprisingly enough, Incineroar might be a monster in doubles. We saw the Fake Out earlier. Also gets Snarl. And with that Will-O-Wisp, you can just shut down your opponent entirely. So the idea behind Trick Room is that you just want to Fake Out an opponent's Pokemon. And now what you can do is set up Trick Room on your side and then use Snarl or Will-O-Wisp. If your opponent has all physical, you Intimidate into Will-O-Wisp, and that's going to shut them down pretty hard, because that hidden ability is just so good with this combo. And now imagine Arcanine. Arcanine does the same thing. Fire-type Pokemon, Intimidate Snarl, might follow up with some kind of like Flare Blitz or something, but imagine Arcanine with Fake Out, and that's kind of Incineroar. So if they say they have 1 physical Pokemon, 1 special Pokemon, you can Snarl. If they have 2 physical, that is the dream. If they have 2 special, that kind of sucks. But overall, we do still get access to the Throat Chop. Throat Chop will reduce Hyper Voice strategies. So if we have a Salamence, Mega Salamence trying to throw out a Hyper Voice, could potentially do something. Same with any Pixelate Pokemon or boosting moves like that. Trick Room, Throat Chop it, because now you're slow, so you outspeed them, Throat Chop, shut down their turn, and then keep churning out the damage. That could be alright. Incineroar isn't here to sweep, interestingly enough, with this set. So you do need a bulky offensive Pokemon that sets up Trick Room and then sweeps from there while receiving a really surprising amount of support from the Incineroar. Could also work with Tailwind strategies. So you just bring the Intimidate Snarl under Tailwind and then maybe add the Flare Blitz to that for a bit more of an offensive touch. Hit EV investment, I was thinking max out hit points and then put more into your special defense, because between Intimidate being automatic and Will-O-Wisp just adding more to that, you want to be more on that special defense, and Sassy Nature will lower your speed enough for that Trick Room. Other moves, Swords Dance, Shadow Claw, Flame Charge. Like I said, you could Flame Charge if you want a Mock Scarf. I don't know what I'd run instead of that, like Flame Charge, Bulk Up, Citrus Berry could do something, Shadow Claw, coverage option. You do also have the Outrage and the Cross Chop. If you want to run those moves, you sure can. And that's kind of it. Other notes that I have are that Scarf and Flare Blitz equals Talonflame damage. So if you're like Jolly Scarf, you're doing as much as a Choice Banded Adamant Talonflame, or it's like 1% less. So that's kind of what we're looking at. 115 base speed outspeeds and Talonflame damage. As for a special set, just don't do it. Like, we have an 80 Pokemon with a nasty plot. It's just not good. I would rather run physical or do something else. And Taunt might also be worth it. That if you Fake Out an opponent's setup Pokemon while you're setting up the Trick Room, while you're setting up the Tailwind, then you can just Taunt them the next turn. So you do lose the coverage, you do lose some kind of utility, but having a backup Taunt could actually be pretty strong. And since you're a Dark-type Pokemon, that's kind of expected. Next up, we have Malicious Moonsault. So I learned something. That Moonsault is actually a real wrestling move, and people were quick to call that one out on me, because I was like, oh, why is it called Moonsault? That just sounds like some kind of salty moon person to keep with a theme of like Pokemon Sun and Moon. It sounded silly, but it's actually real. Pretty much Malicious Moonsault, that's going to be your signature Z move. 180 base power, do I recommend it? No, there's probably better Pokemon to like Z move nuke if you need it. Especially a faster sweeper Pokemon that can kind of maintain momentum with that. That's kind of what we have to say right here. But overall, I will say I am very surprised by the Incineroar. Like, that double set might be legit. For a starter Pokemon, you don't really expect more. Like, starter evolution, yeah, there's Blaziken, yeah, there's Greninja, but the other ones don't really see too much usage. And in double battles, or at least with specific tech, like, Incineroar is more useful than Decidueye for sure. Might be on the same level as Primarina, because Primarina does some ridiculous stuff. But overall, the Incineroar, yeah, I saw its stats, I kind of sighed, but the moveset kind of makes up for the Pokemon, so that could be out pretty well. That I do want to go and look at some damage calculations. Now it's time to wrap up the video with some damage calculators. So the idea is it's just going to apply a lot of the things that I just said, make sense of it all, because look at right here. 50% damage on something like an Oricorio as your minimum hit. So pretty much the Jolly, Choice Scarf, Flame Charge, Bulldoze will show a lot of damage conversion right here. That's kind of what we're looking at. So even with the Jolly nature, Darkest Lariat will pick off an average Pokemon. I think Oricorio is one of my new favorite punching bags to kind of show for damage calc. Because yeah, an 85 base hit point, 80 base defense Pokemon is a little above average, but when we come to some like certain sweeping Pokemon and stuff, so 115 base speed Pokemon that is in this range will be pretty good. Let's actually like go and pull up an Ambipom. Ambipom, very frail, but 75, 66. So yeah, even with that Jolly nature, we're going to outspeed it because we have that Scarf if we are running it. Then we can two-shot it on the Darkest Lariat. So showing some things right there and then changing it around as we go. Some other things to look into are how much damage our Flare Blitz and Darkest Lariat can do. That Salazzle, it's a fast Pokemon, but it is incredibly frail. Darkest Lariat almost finding one-hit KOs all the time. Actually, most time, 93% chance. So pretty much you'll KO Salazzle on the neutral Darkest Lariat quite a bit, and Flare Blitz would be an overkill if it was not resisted by the Salazzle. But this is showing that bulk set, that if we weren't adamant with Life Orb, our damage does kind of kick up a bit, and it shows, yeah, they can't really do too much to us. Salazzle is a very specified sweeper, but as you can see, like, okay, Sludge Bomb for the stab, everything else is kind of resisted and doesn't do too much. So Incineroar does do well against other sweeper Pokemon in this regard. And think about the late game. If you have Stealth Rocks up, if some of your other opponent's Pokemon have taken chip damage, then Incineroar just comes in, it's like, yeah, I get to go and wreck you now, so that could work out. And then we have a showing for some Flare Blitz and just Talonflame matchups and stuff. So yeah, Adamant, Life Orb, just huge amounts of damage. Darkest Lariat will still do quite a bit to a Pokemon that's kind of like Talonflame in those mid-70s, but Flare Blitz would have been a one-hit KO if it wasn't resisted. So that's just kind of showing the damage ranges, and we can go and like pull up Oricorio once again, and as you can see, Flare Blitz, that does good on like 75 base Pokemon, and even up into like 85. Oh, so Oricorio is 75, 70, not 85, 80. But either way, showing good amounts of damage right here, and let's see, like 85, can we do it on the 85 Pokemon? Pretty much. So 81% chance KO. That means even above average tankiness, we're still going to do well against for a lot of damage on that conversion. Other coverage, you know, Earthquake can still do a lot of damage. That kind of adds up right there. So yeah, think about Earthquake. Super effective Earthquake is going to be more damage, I think like 12% more damage than a neutral Flare Blitz after like stab and all that stuff applies. So think about your coverage, think about the extra damage you can find right there, and it might actually turn into something good for the Incineroar, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, this Pokemon is surprising. This Pokemon might actually be a little unpredictable, so it'll be able to slap you around. I'm not saying it's a sweeper, it's not going to sweep. Like, if it got Moxie, that might have been a little scarier. Like, you Moxie Snowball the Darkest Lariat with Jolly nature and like 65 base speed, and that would actually be really hard to keep a hold of. But overall, it's not going to sweep, but it is going to be a little more consistent than I think people might have given it credit for, so could be useful in the end. So if you guys enjoyed the video, hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.